a difference. Our first speaker here is Matt Kendrick, and he is searching for the oomph factor. Take the screen, take the mic, Matt. Welcome.
Hello, which do you prefer, the flashcard or this? Well, thank you, and thanks for still being here. We've got 2 hours more to go on the conference. It's great to see so many people here. And from what I've managed to catch from the conference so far, there have been loads and loads of fantastic, fun, lively, motivating classroom ideas being shared, and exactly the kinds of things that they're well thought out and dynamic, these kind of ideas that can really help us make a difference in terms of providing classes that stand out for our students. And what I'm going to do here is look at some of the factors involved in delivering lessons successfully. Things that can be considered at the planning stage and during the course of a lesson, and also after the lesson as we reflect back on our teaching. Please, through the session, feel free to suggest things of your own and ideas into the chat box as we go during the talk. But first, can you think of a great lesson? Just think for a moment about a best class that you've been in. Maybe you were a teacher, the teacher in the class, or a student, or an observer. Have you got one? Can you put yourself back in that room for a moment? And can you put your finger on what made it special? Was it something about the material, or maybe how the teacher behaved, or just the atmosphere in that class? Okay, so continue. Just throw some ideas in there while I tell you about a lesson that sticks in my mind. And this was one of the first lessons that I saw during the CELTA course, and it was given by the tutor to our TP group. And what stayed in my memory from this day isn't necessarily the activities that the students did, but how the teacher behaved, how she put a group of fairly nervous students at ease and generated a really positive energy level. And these are some of the things that I took down at the time. The teacher was smiling a lot, relaxed body language, but completely alert. Lots and lots of eye contact, humor, lots of gestures, and lots of attention to what the students are saying and doing. A clear voice, but not strained at all. And all these things were working to get the teachers attentive and engaged. What else? What else was happening in this class? Well, another factor was that the students learned how to talk about their own lives. All the language was centered to them and expressing their preferences and their likes and dislikes. And also there were these changes in pace, from sharp, lively drills to time to reflect and formulate and respond. And then there'd be another shift as everyone was working together, focused and on task. Their performance was notably improving and their confidence increasing. The lesson flowed and seemed to fly by, and the students left that room buzzing. How does that compare to your best lesson experience? Like real life, yeah. Yeah, there was personalization in that example, that class that I saw, lots of it. Yeah, very similar? Okay, all right. So in short, what we're talking about here is oomph. And oomph is some kind of elusive thing that comes up in a lot of observation feedback, where you might see things like logical lesson plan, but you need to inject some more oomph at certain points for sections to take off. And other comments, things like think about challenging the students more. If you see they're performing well, see it as an opportunity to add a twist. So how do we add the twist? Where does this oomph come from? It's a hard thing to pin down exactly, but maybe it's a mixture of a whole host of elements, from classroom management to the presence, to planning and to on-the-spot decisions during the class. And seeing it so broadly in the context of self-reflection, we can use this oomph factor as a lens through which to identify our own personal development needs. So as a kind of CPD project development program, there are lots of kind of elements that this touches, and it would be, I think, an interesting one for people to explore. So what about the benefits? Why is it worth searching for and refining these elements that bring about this oomph factor? Well, that engagement, that enthusiasm and interest, everything that we can remember from those best lessons, the ability to create memorable experiences for our learners can only be good for our students, us as our own well-being, and our schools. That positivity engenders, the positivity that it engenders, keeps us all coming back and moving forwards. Okay, so let's look at some of these elements in a bit more detail. Excuse me. Well, one is our varying roles during a lesson. Let's reflect on the different positions we might adopt. In the 90s, Jeremy Harmer reported that many teachers saw themselves as actors, playing different roles during a lesson at particular points, and lists some stage directions for teachers according to the activity types. For instance, during a team game, we might perform energetically or encouragingly, but then in a role play, more retiringly and supportively. The point here is how we project and present ourselves can really influence energy levels in the room and the overall oomph factor. It pays to be aware of your role at any given stage, and also to reflect on the effects of what we do in class, identifying what our decision to intervene or not intervene had on our students. Should we have been more assertive, or should we have just got out of the way and let them get on with it? Other factors. Well, topics. Without our students' engagement in the subject matter, it's unlikely that we're going to get anywhere. And bearing in mind that no two students are the same, or no two groups are the same, it's always worth finding out what turns your students on and turning that to your advantage. And similarly, when it comes to materials, engagement is again key here. If they're pitched right for the group, and if it pushes them sufficiently, are the kind of questions that we need to consider. As regards to lesson shapes, we can consider handing over more control to the learners. The link on this slide takes you to a video which follows a secondary school German teacher in a state school who identifies her unwillingness to relinquish control over her lessons as something to change. She settles on a carousel lesson, like the one pictured here, to make her class more interactive. The whole thing is really well worth watching. I don't know if you've ever tried a lesson like this, but students do seem to like them. They get really engaged. They tend to be motivating. They keep them busy and engaged. But maybe, on the downside, lessons like this can be so materials-led that they restrict the potential for oomph in other ways. We might be tempted to opt for a materials-led lesson, seeing materials as a kind of pacey, dynamic, fail-safe insurance plan that will inject elements of competition or purpose to the communication in the classroom. But Dogme asks us to evaluate the load of materials available to us against the space we need on courses to pay attention to the lives of our learners, to give them the room to establish and express the identities that they want to bring to the classroom. So how about making room for learners to be the resource, and making the learners the source of the oomph in our lessons? The idea of space in a lesson also extends to a maxim from the proponents of demand high, that less is more. In search for oomph, we should then be wary of a top-speed lesson that hurtles students from one activity to another. It will need pace, but it will also need some space. Some room in which to fine-tune what's happening and adapt to what learners need in a particular moment, or to raise the bar of the challenge, to repeat a task in order to improve, to provide adequate thinking time for students to prepare well so that their output is successful and carries oomph for them. Another area of classroom management is just how we start our lessons, how we set the right tone, and bring them to a clear, satisfying close. Routines and stating aims and revisiting them at the end of a lesson are just a few ways to do this, and I'm sure you have ideas of your own that you could add. Now, I doubt if these thoughts are themselves entirely new to you, but I've found that reflecting on them in this context is a very useful way when it comes to trying to add more oomph to my lessons. So what do you think? Am I complicating life too much by tying this oomph factor to so many differing elements? Would you pin it down to one particular thing? And if so, what? If we have time, we could return just to this table that I showed you earlier, and maybe have a go at filling it in. Anything goes, such things that I may have touched on, or things from your own practice, or reflections on things you've observed. So if you have any ideas related to these areas, just go ahead. I think we've gone into a dogma debate on here. Skip the planning part. Yeah. Or not let the planning override the decisions during the lesson. Okay. Well, these are some of the things that I threw up. It's not a kind of exclusive thing. The things in the planning column also transfer over to the during the lesson or the post reflections, the post-lesson reflections. I think there's a kind of, rather than considering oomph to be something that's kind of either an innate thing, or we can see it as something that can be acquired and built on by considering factors like these. So if you do have any ideas on this, please get in touch by Twitter or at International House Santa Clara, where I am. And here are some ideas of things that relate to this that I found useful in preparing this. Alistair's coming up later, and his blog here about the disappearing act is a nice way of kind of seeing how you know, the decisions we make in class can affect the dynamic and the oomph of our lessons.
Thank you very much, Matt.
So thank you for
listening.
Did I run over a bit? I'm sorry.
On the oomph teaching movement, we can forget about all of this demand high and dogma stuff.